everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition show. This is the October 21st, 2024 edition of the show. Our mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich corporations who ship our jobs overseas. As you can see, we have a full boat. So I'm not going to be reciting one of the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But we are going to start with Dick on Article 23, number 1.
Number 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself or herself and her or his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for protection of his or her interests.
Okay, and as is our custom, we'd like to thank the staff here at Northern Berkshire Community Television Corporation for their assistance in putting on our show. And we want to extend our congratulations to David Fabiano, who is now on retirement officially. And thank you to Nicole Brown, Joanne Hurlbut, and Matthew Tucker, who without their assistance, we wouldn't be able to produce the show. And to Michael Putnam, who is the director of the community radio station, WNNB, for airing the audio portions of our show on Fridays at 6 p.m. And I'm going to be looking at my cold sore for the whole entire show.
And welcome Matthew Tucker as the new executive director.
Absolutely, thank you.
I just want to say that not only am I going to miss, seeing Dave here, but I'll miss his friendship. It was always nice to be with him.
But we can form new one with Matthew.
And we wish him luck.
We'll drag him back here. We'll drag him back here.
So, Dick, we're going to continue our conversations from the last two shows on the indigenous people, I believe,
right. And the
in the area.
Yeah, we were celebrating last Monday Indigenous Peoples Day, and we just sort of hit on a few topics. One about how the inspiration of our founding fathers when they came up with the Constitution of the United States. Ben Franklin and George Washington observed what the Six Nations Confederacy had done. And we talked about the two-row wampum last time, but there's a video we're going to watch about on the influence that they had on our founding fathers.
We're often taught that it was the ancient Greeks who invented our democracy. What they forget to mention is the group of Native Americans who helped show us the way. The Iroquois Confederacy inhabited northern and western New York State. They called themselves Haudenosaunee, meaning people of the Longhouse. The Confederacy was founded by the great peacemaker, Deganawida, to put a stop to internal feuds and become a united front against outside threats. Each tribe had a voice. And while many issues were addressed at a local level, major decisions like defense were made as a whole. They even had a constitution known as the Great Law of Peace. For the framers of the U.S. Constitution, they were an inspiration, a real-life example of how democracy could and should work. But the Founding Fathers didn't just stumble upon the ideas from the Iroquois Confederacy. The information was shared by the members of the Iroquois themselves. They attended the Albany Congress in 1754, when Benjamin Franklin, inspired by the Iroquois Confederacy, submitted what became known as the Albany Plan of Union. It advocated for the union of the colonies to improve security and defense from foreign powers. Although it was never adopted, its influence remained. In 1776, the Iroquois were invited to address the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, and shortly after, the Founding Fathers drafted a constitution echoing the Great Law of Peace. James Monroe even personally requested the company of the Oneida Chief for some guidance. In 1988, the U.S. Senate published a resolution paying tribute to the Iroquois Confederacy. It acknowledged its influence on the democratic principles which underpin our government today. Why do you think students in the U.S. are taught that our form of democracy stems from Greece and not from Native Americans?
Oh, well, I would think the answer to that question is guilt. A sense of guilt for how we have treated the indigenous people since we've been here, since then.
And I'll say by design. Done by design.
Why don't we acknowledge that the indigenous people
So we-
helped form the American democracy, actually gave us the foundation and basis for it?
Peace is one of them.
So you have some native blood in you, Susan?
Yeah, Sioux Indian, Sitting Bull, and he fought with Custer.
On your
at
mother
the
or
little-
father's side?
On my mother, on my father's side.
It's amazing.
He fought with Custer, and then after that, he was on that Wild West show with him, with Custer. If you remember that Wild West show, yeah.
Wild Bill
With
Hickok
the
show?
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
Indian. Yeah.
That's great, yeah, but that's one of the things that, you know, we're sort of blind to the fact that we still have indigenous people here among us, and they do need acknowledgement. One thing about that video, though, it talks about the Iroquois and the Six Nations,
Right.
but they weren't the original. According to people that I've spoken with that from this area, they say that the Mohegans, and even looking at this book on land by Simon Winchester, who lives in South County, he talks about the fact that the Mohegans were the first ones in this area. And the serenity of the Mohegans suffered terminally. The villagers first began to fall fatally ill, victims of smallpox, measles, influenza, and all outside-borne ailments to which they had no natural immunity. And those who survived began to be ordered to abandon their lands and their possessions and to leave the countryside that they had occupied and farmed for thousands of years, and ordered to do so by white-skinned visitors who had no knowledge of the land and its needs, and who regarded it only as its potential for reward. The area was ideal for colonization, said the European advisees. The natives, now seen more as wildlife than as brothers, more kith than kin, could go elsewhere. So to look at the Mohegans, you know, I was told that maybe we should look at the Stockbridge-Munsee tribe. So I did some search on YouTube, and there was a historian from the Stockbridge-Munsee tribe on a PBS special. So let's listen to what she has to say about their history as the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohegans.
Kolomalsi. Good morning. My name is Kim Veely. I'm an enrolled member of the Stockbridge-Munsee tribe, otherwise known as the Mohicanuk, which means people of the flowing water. And I will begin with Kishalamokwen Elamiliang Yon Kwai Kish Kwik, which means thank you, Creator, for this beautiful day and the opportunity to share my tribe's story with others. We're not Aboriginal to Wisconsin. We are one of the, what is commonly known as one of the New York tribes, and originally occupied much of the land north of Albany all the way into Lake Champlain along the Hudson River, which is a large river that ebbs and flows with tides, is why my people are known as Mohicanuk, people of the flowing waters. The shortened version of that is Mohican. The Hudson River has many islands, and one of the islands, which is called Skodak Island, is one of our great council fires, and that is where our ancestors met and took care of business for the tribe. It's where the sachems resided and was the center of the government, basically, until the Dutch came, and it's believed that my ancestors were among those that greeted Henry Hudson when he first came up the Hudson River, helped him and his crew survive. And it was during that time that diseases started to spread throughout the tribes in the upper New York area, including my tribe. Continuing factions and warring between the Mohawks and the Mohicans resulted in a dramatic loss of members. Eventually, it was very difficult for some of the remaining bands to continue to survive in that area. We have historically had approximately 3 sachems in the tribe, which would be known as chiefs. One would be the chief of the people and deal with essentially issues that would be unique to just our tribe and our tribe's issues. And then we would usually have a spiritual sachem who would guide the tribe on a spiritual level and guide the other sachems in a spiritual way. And then we also had basically what would be the international diplomat, if you will. And that sachem would be basically the chief among other bands of our tribe and other tribes. At the time, we had 2 sachems, Umpasheen and Kankapot. They were approached by Scottish missionaries to missionize and stabilize the tribal membership and advocated for Christianization of the tribe, and I think convinced Umpasheen and Kankapot that this might be a good idea for survival. Neither one of the chiefs wanted to bind the membership with that decision without first taking it back, had numerous meetings with the tribal members, and came to a decision that maybe this was best for the tribe to set up basically a reservation in western Massachusetts. And I don't think people really understand how difficult that is for people to leave your homeland. You know, that you've been there for thousands of years, and to walk away from everything that's familiar to you to go someplace new. And this is about 1732, and at that time 2 townships were set aside for our members. They actually became members of a town board, so to speak, and set up a mission school, set up a sawmill, set up a grist mill, and learned farming, became Christianized, and became educated. Some of the members started the Indian school, which I think is the predecessor to what is now Dartmouth College. The Berkshires, where they settled, is supposedly geographically similar to an area in England known as Stockbridge. So it was easy for people to always refer to us as the Stockbridge Indians. And so to this day, we carry that English name forward. But in our way and in our traditions, we're Mohicanux. We lived fairly peacefully during that time in western Massachusetts until the American Revolution broke out. We have a significant history of fighting in wars, and our members chose to fight for the colonists. There are very significant battles that are commemorated involving many Stockbridge who sacrificed their lives during that time. And it was following the war that the men returned back to Stockbridge, Mass, and discovered that a lot of the missionaries and non-Indians had taken over the farms and the land, and the children and the elders and other members were pushed back into wigwams in the woods. There was a lot of struggle to regain that land, Petitions were filed with the territorial government of Massachusetts to no avail. And because it had such a devastating impact on the membership, the New York Oneida tribe invited the Stockbridge back to New York, where they had a reservation. So the membership moved back and were given a reserve within the New York Oneida's reserve, which is known as Stockbridge, New York. And did the same thing again, set up a mission house, a school, set up a grist mill, got farming, built homes. And it wasn't long after that that the federal government's policy was to remove tribes from Aboriginal territory. There was a lot of tension between non-Indians and fights over the land. And the policies shifted then to move all of the eastern bands and eastern tribes west of the Mississippi. And the migration out of New York started in, I think, about 1819, 1820 to what is now Muncie, Indiana. And the Muncies had also promised us some land there as part of their treaty, but by the time some of our members got there to stake a claim, the Muncies had been deprived through another treaty of their treaty reservation. So both the Muncies and the Stockbridge were out and joined and moved to the next place, which was around Lake Winnebago, and that's where you get the Stockbridge Muncie Indians. And in fact, some of our members are from the Muncies. We were continuing to be forced west, and the tribe was really, really resisting that. And so, being the diplomats that they are, began to negotiate with the Menominee tribe directly for some kind of property to allow us a permanent settlement. And in fact, the Menominee tribe and the Stockbridge tribe reached agreement and submitted the agreement to Congress for ratification and approval, and it was denied. Congress then did get involved in establishing a reservation, and the reservation here in Wisconsin was established by a treaty of 1856. And so this is where we've been ever since. They built log homes. They had to clear the land, workhorses pulling these huge roots and burning and clearing, and the toil that it took to move some of the boulders just to clear a field to plow and plant a garden. We set up the mission house, and we set up another school, and Electa Quinney, one of our members, opened the school up, and the tribe opened the school up to be a public school. And that was before Wisconsin was a state. So we stake her claim as being the first public school teacher of Wisconsin, which we're very proud of. I think it's hugely significant that we survived against all odds, and that we know how to survive. If you don't have food, you make food. You hunt, you fish, you gather. And so our land is so central to how we live, because if gaming were to go away or something catastrophic would happen and we are all off the grid, we have land here that we know as a people we could survive. And that's so important, because I think we always lose track of what's really, really important in our lives, and it's just basic food, being together, breathing clean air, drinking clean water. And these are fundamental values that go to the core of who you are as a people. And it's not just for our tribe, as human beings. Our very survival depends on it. And I think that's something that we carry. We're a spiritual people. You know, Christianization, some are very Christianized still to this day. We have faith. Some, you know, believe in the Creator, some believe in God. We have different, we represent different religions, but, you know, that spirit and that faith, I think, also carries carries us as human beings. So our emblem is called Many Trails, to exemplify all of the different removals that we've had from east to west, and all the times that we had to just set up and make homes and then leave. And you'll see in the Many Trails sign the sign of a cross, which indicates our Christianization. We have a lot of teachers in our tribe today, and they've been very active in developing curriculum to teach children about the tribe's history. And one of the exercises they have is for the children to move in the classroom from station to station and start something and not be able to finish it and be told, now you need to move to the next station. And the children, you'll see, I'm not done, or I'm not finished, or why do I have to move? And it's like, nope, just move. We said move now. And it really illustrates for the children to understand what that's like to move. Redo, start over. So there is a resilience there, and it's a strength, probably from our faith and knowing the basics on how to live. And we're reminded of that all the time. Just a couple months ago, one of our elders came to open session at a tribal council meeting and said, what are your plans as our leaders if something were to happen and our grid shut down? Remember, we need to survive. So it's part of our planning, we're ready. Bring it on.
Oh, I just think that's exceptional. And I think all of us grew up in the Berkshires. How come we didn't know any of this history? I mean, that's just a travesty, I think. But it was wonderful to hear her speak.
Yeah. And that's an abbreviated version of it. I think we just showed 14 minutes of a 28-minute. We cut out some, so that you can go on YouTube, or hopefully we'll have another program where we can just show the whole thing separately, so people can learn about it. But
Oh,
But yes. And the parallel is, it's still going on in this world.
yeah.
Here we go. Not only here, but across the world, because people are being told, move. I mean, basically Israel is telling the Palestinians to move, some factions of the Arab world are telling the Israelis to move. It hasn't changed the dynamic about move, because I want this land.
Well, listen, I just, especially if you're talking about immigration, who wants to leave their home? Exactly what she was talking about. Nobody wants to leave their home.
No.
These are human beings that they are very frightened if you have to move. And for the indigenous people and the Munsee, Mohican, it's a matter of dying or keep going to stay alive. It's a tragic story. But the resilience part of it is hopeful and beautiful.
I think the thing that keeps them going is their relationship to the land
Yes.
And their faith.
and their faith.
Yeah.
But it's intertwined, because they're not,
Yeah.
they don't see themselves as separate from the earth,
No.
but a part of it. I brought this book too. It's called The New Evangelization by Leonardo Boff. He wrote this in the late 1980s, but it talks about indigenous people in Mexico. But it's part of the liberation theology movement that was taking place in Latin America, and they were, like the Christianization of these tribes. They were Christianized too. Before the Spaniards could kill them, they offered a chance for them to convert. But when they studied that Christian Bible, the Judaic Christian Bible, they read about Exodus and the relationship that the land was a gift from God. And but when you're alienated from the land, when you're aliens, strangers in a strange land, see, as long as they could be associated with the land, they could survive, and they could meet their basic needs. And what's happening now with the poor in the United States, the homeless, the people that have tried to obliviate themselves because they don't see any relationship with the land and the world around them. So they're taking drugs, or they're hurting themselves, they're hurting others. It's a direct relationship with the land. And rather than being seen as a gift from God, it's something they have no relationship with at all. And I think the fact that they could move and move and move, they still maintain that relationship with the land.
And they made a conscious effort to maintain the relationship and to realize that this is where we started, but there's still land. Wherever we move, there's still land.
Well, part of the
So that they
indigenous
can do it.
people being taken off their land and brought into urban centers also was the degradation of what happened to them in their lives, which comes right back to the colonization and, you know, the control and the greed and the disintegration of their lives and their traditions and their rituals and their rights, frankly.
This was one amazing thing I heard somewhere else, and that I heard it in this book, and then I heard it in this one also, but it just, I'll do it real quickly. It says between 1500 and 1600, the native population, this was in the plateau around Mexico City, the native population was reduced by a ratio of 20 to 1. In 1519, when Hernan Cortez reached the plateau of the Anahuac in Mexico, some 25,200,000 persons were living there. By 1595, only 1,375,000 remained. It's like 24 million people gone.
I hope we're going to
Because of
continue,
disease and death.
brought to them by
Yes.
colonizers.
Oh, yes.
I hope we just keep continuing this conversation. I guess we're at the end now.
Power
I
to-
think they are. Power to the
Power to the
people.
people. Thank you.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past are all learned with workers' blood. Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches.